Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Toronto, Canada on November 29th, 2025 for Reason to Resist. The spy who stalked me has resurfaced yet again. His name is Ahik Aharony, and he's a former captain in the Israeli military. On Thursday of this week, I argued in a courtroom in Ottawa, Canada's capital, that Canada is violating its obligation under the Genocide Convention to prevent Israel's genocide in occupied Palestine. Aharony showed up without any warning at the hearing, which lasted the entire day. And he was there pretty much from the beginning to the end, which makes me wonder, does the man have a real job? It was the first time that I was face to face with Aharony in several years. The last time that I heard from him was in July of this year when he messaged me on Facebook Messenger to tell me how proud he was to have served in the Israeli military. And here you can see a message he sent to me on July 28th of this year. This was shortly after we, on Reason to Resist, published two reports about Aharony, which I'm going to get to in a moment. And he started out his jovial message by denying, in the face of a mountain of evidence to the contrary, that Israel is committing a genocide, and dismissing the starvation of Palestinian civilians as an unfortunate result of war. And he then went on to compare the situation to Sudan and claimed, as have many Israeli propagandists over the past 2 years of genocide, that Hamas can stop it tomorrow if they surrender. Of course, this disregards the fact that Palestinians have a right to armed resistance against their oppressor, and also ignores that this genocide is unfolding in the occupied West Bank as well, where Hamas is not in charge. And then he added, without a hint of shame or trepidation, quote, "I'm as proud as ever to be a veteran of the IDF, especially proud of the professionalism and effectiveness demonstrated in Lebanon and around Iran, where, of course, Israel has committed countless war crimes and acts of aggression over the last 2 years, and almost had its ass handed to it by both Hezbollah and the Iranian missile forces." Now, after all of that, he added, in a congenial manner, "How are you doing these days? I have a very busy 2 weeks ahead of me, but I can meet with you in Montreal later this month." I actually ignored that message, those two messages. I certainly didn't accept his invitation to meet with him. Now, in today's report, I'm going to talk to you about what happened in the courtroom on Thursday in Ottawa, and I'll tell you more about my encounter on that day with Aharony. I'm then going to offer you an update on the shocking developments in Israel's genocidal rampage in occupied Palestine. Before we launch into these subjects, please remember to like and share this video if you find it informative. And if you're not already a subscriber of Reason to Resist, we warmly encourage you to become one. So today, November 29th, is the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. At 2 p.m. this afternoon, I joined protesters here in downtown Toronto at the corner of Bay and Front Street to show our solidarity with the victims of Israel's genocide. Wherever you live, please find a way to show solidarity with the Palestinian people today. So let's get into what happened on Thursday in the courtroom in Ottawa. As I previously reported, I and 6 other Canadian lawyers launched a lawsuit against Canada's government in November of 2024, alleging that Canada was violating its duty to prevent genocide under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention of 1948. We filed this lawsuit on behalf of 2 Palestinian-Canadians who are originally from Gaza and whose family members have literally been obliterated during this 2+ years of genocide. One of our clients, Hani El-Batnigi, was actually in the Gaza Strip on October 7th, 2023, visiting family. He had gone there in September of that year for the first time since 1967 to see extended members of his family. And when the genocide began, he tried desperately to leave the Gaza Strip and return to Canada. He issued numerous pleas to the Canadian government in an attempt to extract himself from the Gaza Strip. And for some weeks, those pleas went largely unheeded. And finally, he managed to escape but not before being struck or having a near-death incident with an airstrike that knocked him almost unconscious and caused his ears to bleed. So we not only are alleging in this lawsuit that Canada is violating its obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, we're also arguing that Canada has violated its obligations to our clients under the Canadian Constitution, and particularly Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and Section 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees the right to equality. Now, after we filed our lawsuit in late 2024, the Attorney General of Canada notified us that he intended to move for the dismissal of the entire suit. The main basis of the Attorney General's motion is something called the doctrine of justiciability. Now, I could dress this up in all sorts of interesting and high-sounding theoretical ways, but fundamentally what the doctrine of justiciability boils down to in Canadian law is what I call the hot potato doctrine. And that is to say that the defendant says to the court, this is a political hot potato. You don't want to touch it. Leave it to the political class and the so-called democratic processes to work it all out. But you as a judge have no business entering into this dispute. So that's what they call the doctrine of justiciability. In the United States, they call it the political question doctrine. So that's what we were in court on Thursday, November 27th, to argue, was this a case that the courts ought to hear, or was it in fact a case that they should decline to hear, leaving it to Canada's depraved political elite to deliver some measure of justice to the victims of this genocide under the Genocide Convention of 1948. At the end of the hearing, the judge informed the lawyers that he would need time to render a decision. And I would estimate that he's likely going to issue his decision several weeks and maybe even several months from now. He, as he noted at the end of the hearing, we've given a great deal to think about, so he's going to have to work through a number of complex issues. So who is Ahik Aharony, and what the hell was he doing at the hearing on Thursday? Well, as I mentioned, he's a former captain in the Israeli military. He now lives in Canada and purports to work for a financial services corporation by the name of DRW. This company claims to have offices in Chicago, Montreal, and numerous other cities around the world, one of which, interestingly, is Tel Aviv. DRW's website does not list an office in Ottawa where Aharony claims to live. Aharony first reached out to me in 2017, almost 9 years ago, over Facebook Messenger, and that's been the main way that he's communicated with me over the years. At the time, I was litigating a case in the Federal Court of Canada relating to products made in Israel's illegal West Bank settlements. And basically, the claim in that case was that these products that were coming out of Israel's West Bank settlements, which Canada itself at the time and up until the current time acknowledges to be illegal under international law, that those products were being imported into Canada with product of Israel labels, and that this was a violation of Canada's consumer protection and product labeling laws because the settlements are not in fact in Israel. Something which, as I say, Canada's government itself openly acknowledges on the Global Affairs Canada website and has done so for decades. And so I represented in that case a member of the Canadian Jewish community, David Kattenberg. He was the complainant. And ultimately, we persuaded a judge of the federal court trial division that these labels were false, misleading, and deceptive, and therefore violated Canadian consumer protection law. We then went up to the Federal Court of Appeal, where the judges, in oral argument, expressed considerable sympathy for my client's position. But at the end of the day, they decided to punt this back to the regulatory body, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, saying that they had not adequately explained their reasons for allowing these labels to be used on these products coming out of Israel's illegal settlements. And that's basically where that case has been mired ever since. David Kattenberg and I have been waiting now for years, for over 5 years, for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to come up with a new rationale based upon an examination of the facts and circumstances to support whatever decision it is now inclined to make with respect to the labeling of these illegal products. So that is a legal saga that has been ongoing now for over 8 years, and it's far from over. In any case, it was in that context that Aharony first reached out to me in 2017. And at that time, he messaged me. I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of him before. To tell me that he was an Israeli. He didn't mention in his initial outreach that he had served as an officer in the Israeli military, but he purported to have sympathy for the position of my client, while at the same time openly confessing to me that he was a committed Zionist. And from that point onward, I received dozens and dozens of messages from Aharony over the years. He was always congenial. He was a smooth talker. He always seemed to want to convey the impression that he and I could get along, even though he openly admitted that we had dramatically different points of view. And the way that I found out that he had served as an officer in the Israeli military was that I consulted some people in the Palestinian Solidarity movement to see if they knew him. And one of them had actually encountered him before in Ottawa. And it was that person who informed me that Aharony had served as an officer in the Israeli military. Something that became clear from the dozens of messages I received from Aharony over those 8 to 9 years was that he was monitoring very, very carefully my public commentary, because he would oftentimes comment on what I was saying in videos or on social media in my posts within hours of my having actually said it. So it left me with the unmistakable impression that he was paying very, very careful attention to what I was saying. And it struck me that a person who has a job, a real job, a legitimate job, would probably not have enough time to devote to following the social media commentary of some particular Palestinian solidarity activist. It just all struck me as very odd. And, in I think around 2020, he kept saying, we should meet. I live in Ottawa, you live in Montreal. Let's get together and have a beer. And finally, simply out of curiosity, about 4 years ago, I agreed to meet with him in downtown Montreal. He said he was visiting the city, and I was at my home in Montreal at the time. And we had a conversation over lunch, over which I think it became crystal clear that he and I weren't going to come to any kind of an agreement or an understanding about Israel's apartheid regime. But throughout the lunch, he was, as I say, very affable and agreeable, and struck me as very much a smooth operator. Now, after that, one meeting was quite enough for me. I didn't have any particular desire to meet with him again. I had better things to do with my time. He repeatedly offered to meet with me on subsequent occasions. And then last year, or it might have been earlier this year, actually, while I was in Kalamata, Greece, where I have a second home, he contacted me again over Facebook Messenger and told me that he was coming to Kalamata in the winter, which struck me as odd, because there's very little tourism in Kalamata in the winter. That's the low point of the tourist season. And there's nothing really to see in Kalamata in the winter. There's not much in the way of historical sites. You come there in the summertime, there's lots of beach activities you can engage in, but not in the wintertime. There is, however, at the Kalamata airport, a training center for the Israeli drone manufacturer Elbit Systems, something about which I've complained repeatedly on this program. Now, he didn't say he was coming to Kalamata to do some work at the Elbit training center. He didn't mention it at all. In fact, he didn't offer me any explanation for why he was coming to Kalamata in the dead of winter. And when he offered to meet me in Kalamata, I said yes, just purely out of curiosity, hoping that I might find out why he was there and whether it had anything to do with the drone manufacturing or training center at the Kalamata airport. So I accepted his invitation, and then at the last second, he canceled on me without explaining why, in fact, he was unavailable to meet with me in Kalamata. So all of that prompted me to publish a report for the very first time earlier this year on Aharony. And in it, I referred to him as the spy who stalked me. Now, Aharony watched that report as soon as it was published, and I know this because he messaged me about it within hours of its publication, and he denied vigorously in that exchange following my publication of my first report about him that he was an agent of the Mossad. Although his answer was somewhat circuitous. And so I then did a second report on Aharony, in which I conveyed the fact that he had, in a sort of convoluted manner, denied that he was an agent of the Mossad. And that was, I think we called that report The Spy Who Stalked Me Part 2. And again, Aharony responded very promptly to that report and issued a blanket, unequivocal denial that he had anything to do with the security services of Israel. And at the same time as this was going on, Aharony changed his social media profiles and started to adopt fake names and told me, he didn't tell me that he had done that for this purpose, but he was complaining in these messages that he was sending to me at the time that I was drawing negative attention to him, and that was causing him to feel insecure. And so I imagine it was on that basis, or he wanted me to believe it was on that basis, that he was changing his names on his social media profiles and making it difficult for members of my audience to find him online. So this brings me to the hearing of the genocide litigation motion on Thursday of this week in Ottawa. Basically, from July of this year, when I got that message where, in which Aharony declared to be immensely proud of having served in the honorable and valorable Israeli military, from July of this year up until he showed up without any warning in the courtroom, I didn't hear from Aharony. And what happened on that day is that it was a large courtroom in the Ottawa Courthouse of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. It was being zoomed to the public, and there were dozens of people in the courtroom on that day. And at some point near the beginning of the hearing, I turned around just to see who was in the courtroom, if I recognized anybody. And I saw Aharony, but because I had only ever met him face to face on one occasion when we had a beer together in Montreal, I didn't immediately connect the face to the name. I knew that I had met this person before when I saw him, but I didn't realize immediately that was Aharony. And then during the lunch break, I went to the washroom, and as I was coming out of the washroom, Aharony came in. And I kind of had the impression that this person was following me to the washroom. I don't know if that was the case or not. But when I saw him, I said hello, not realizing it was him. But having the strong impression that I had met this person before. And it was at that stage that he confirmed to me that he was Ahik Aharony. And in that exchange, he was perfectly affable. He didn't seem to be upset in the slightest that I had published 2 reports about him, that I had accused him of being a spy in the service of the genocidal Israeli entity. And again, he reiterated his desire to maintain some kind of a discourse with me. I said, thank you very much. And, went on about my business. And as far as I could tell, I didn't, pay careful attention to him during the afternoon after the lunch break, because I was obviously busy arguing the motion on behalf of our clients. But my sense was that he remained there pretty much for the entire day. Ultimately, I'm going to leave it up to the members of our audience to decide whether Aharony is a spy for Israel. If you want to know more about him, I'm going to leave links to the 2 reports I published about him in the first half of this year, where you can get considerably more information about my interactions with him over the past 8 years. I will say this: whether or not Aharony is a spy in the service of the Israeli military or government. And by the way, you don't have to work for the Mossad to be a spy in the service of the Israeli genocidal entity. It has plenty of, security apparatuses and divisions and departments. It is really a vast surveillance and espionage bureaucracy. That's probably what Israel excels at the most. So he might be working for some other arm of the Israeli government. And then again, he could be a spy without actually being technically in the employ of any department or arm or state-owned enterprise in Israel. Because in my view, it is a virtual certainty that Israel plants people in the private sector, gives them plausible deniability that they have any kind of connection to the state. But in fact, even though they're working or appear to be working in the private sector and they're being paid by a corporation that is listed on some stock exchange or that's owned privately by some very wealthy individuals, even though technically they're on the payroll of a corporation and are working in the private sector, they continue to maintain some sort of information gathering and surveillance responsibilities for the state of Israel. I think it's an absolute certainty that Israel is doing that. So even though he claims to be working for this corporation DRW and may in fact be working for this corporation DRW, I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination precludes the possibility that Aharony is in some way gathering information on Canadian Palestinian solidarity activists for the state of Israel. So this brings me to the question of what Aharony had to say about the hearing itself. And here is a message which he sent me on Thursday evening. So this would have been, this was almost at 10 p.m. in the evening, about 5 to 6 hours after the hearing ended in Ottawa. And as you can see, he said, "I was impressed by your litigation abilities. Your partner, Mr. Martinez, is Israeli-level pushy. I don't know how smart it is to dictate to the justice a list of what he must and mustn't do." So first of all, he's referring here to my colleague Shane Martinez, my friend and colleague Shane Martinez, a criminal defense lawyer in Toronto who argued that motion with me. I can assure you that there was nothing pushy about Shane's submissions on Thursday, let alone pushy to the extent of the way the average Israeli behaves. Shane is a model of decorum and civility and professionalism. If anything, I thought I was a little bit pushier than Shane was during the oral argument. And he did a fantastic job. And that was the only person who's expressed to me any kind of a negative assessment of Shane's performance is this character, whose assessment means absolutely nothing. Everybody else was raving about how Shane performed, and rightly so. And what I take this to be is I think he's just kind of trying to ingratiate himself with me by, just engaging in crass flattery and, trying to perhaps generate or exploit some kind of perceived rivalry between me and my fellow legal counsel, of which there is absolutely none. At the end of the day, it's just another piece of evidence, this message that Aharony is trying really hard to convince me that he's my bud. He's not my bud. And there's nothing you can do, Ahik. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be listening to this this report shortly after it's published. There's nothing you can do, nothing to gain my trust. Anybody who denies Israel's genocide, but even worse, it proclaims proudly his pride in having served in the genocidal Israeli military almost 2 years into this genocide, which is what you did in July of this year, is a person of the lowest moral character and someone with whom I want nothing to do. Now, this brings me to the subject of important developments over the past few days in occupied Palestine. And I'm going to begin with this report. Earlier today, the genocidal Israeli entity massacred 3 people in Gaza, 2 of whom were children aged 11 and 8. And these 2 boys you see here in this photo, this is an article in the Times of Israel. They were bombed, literally an Israeli aircraft dropped at least one bomb on them, these little boys, after they allegedly crossed this imaginary and arbitrary yellow line that Israel has set up for the purported protection of its troops. Just to be clear, and as the International Court of Justice ruled last year, Israel's occupation of the Gaza Strip is illegal. Israel has no right to maintain any kind of a troop presence anywhere in the Gaza Strip. So this yellow line is completely illegitimate to begin with, but even if there was some legal basis to it, the idea that these two quote-unquote suspects, and note even the Times of Israel, the pro-genocide publication, puts the word suspects in quotation marks because it is being forced to acknowledge that any suggestion that these two little boys constituted any kind of a threat to Israel's ground forces is implausible in the extreme. The children who were killed in this strike in the area of Bani Suhaila on the outskirts of Khan Yunis, they were named by Palestinian media outlets as brothers Juma and Fadi Abu Asi. As I mentioned, they were 11 and 8 years old, respectively. Bani Suhaila lies on the Israeli-controlled side of the yellow line, to which the Israeli military withdrew on October 10th as part of the so-called ceasefire deal in Gaza. Israel's military actually confirmed that it carried out the airstrike. So it's not denying that it did that, saying that the troops from the Kafir brigade identified two quote-unquote suspects crossing the line in Khan Yunis area, carrying out, quote, suspicious activity on the ground, close quote, and approaching the forces, quote, in a way that posed an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force, the cowards and savages of the Israeli Air Force, obliterated them with a bomb, at least one, to, quote, remove the threat to Israel's ground forces. So it appears that the latte-sipping baby killers are such sniveling cowards that the presence of these two little boys, who apparently were scavenging for firewood in the increasingly cold weather in the Gaza Strip, they felt threatened by them. And what's most amazing about this is that Israel's military actually says outright that its soldiers felt threatened. It doesn't feel any shame in putting that in writing and stating it publicly. Now, I have no doubt that Ahik Aharony feels immensely proud about the efficiency and valor with which his fellow soldiers in Israel's genocide forces obliterated these two children. Such courage. In related news, Amnesty International declared that the genocide in Gaza has not ended with the implementation or purported implementation of this fraudulent ceasefire on October 11th of this year. And here you can see a headline from an Agence France Presse article, and the institution Amnesty International, one of the most reputable human rights organizations in the West, has said unambiguously that Israel is still committing genocide in Gaza. This is something that we have been saying on Reason to Resist on an almost daily basis, going back all the way to October 11th of this year, when this ceasefire was scheduled to begin. It's been evident for some time, in fact, almost from the time the ceasefire began, that the genocide is ongoing, not only because Israel has been killing on average around 8 to 10 Palestinian civilians in Gaza every single day, and wounding dozens of them since October 11th, but also because Israel has only allowed something in the range of 28% of the agreed humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip, and has destroyed, since the so-called ceasefire began, in excess of 1,500 structures. There were very few remaining to begin with, but it has continued to demolish the civilian infrastructure of Gaza. So there's really no serious question that the genocide in the Gaza Strip is ongoing. And in the West Bank, where the genocide was also happening, albeit at a lower level of intensity, the intensity of the genocide has actually escalated since the so-called ceasefire went into effect. Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Kayamah said, quote, "The ceasefire risks creating a dangerous illusion that life in Gaza is returning to normal, but while Israeli authorities and forces have reduced the scale of their attacks and allowed limited amounts of humanitarian aid into Gaza, the world must not be fooled. Israel's genocide is not over." Now, as far as I can tell, have not seen any other comparable statements from other Western human rights organizations. I've seen no such statement, for example, I looked for one, but found none, from US-based Human Rights Watch, which earlier in the genocide did essentially agree with Amnesty International's assessment that Israel was committing genocide. But they've been pretty silent since October 11th of this year. Nor have I seen such a statement from US-based or from the Israeli-based human rights group B'Tselem. B'Tselem also was one of the human rights organizations of the many that declared that Israel was committing genocide before the ceasefire went into effect. Now, although there hasn't been a formal declaration by B'Tselem that the genocide is ongoing, the executive director of B'Tselem came fairly close to saying just that. The executive director's name is Yuli Novak, and as you can see here, she warned that we have not yet seen the worst in the Gaza Strip. It's vitally important that the UN bodies and the most prominent Western human rights groups and experts publicly acknowledge, and repeatedly so, that the genocide is ongoing, because the Trump and Netanyahu regimes, and indeed all major Western governments, are working overtime to use this fraudulent ceasefire to fool their electorates into believing that the slaughter has ended, so that we will not continue to place upon them the kind of pressure necessary to bring this genocide to an end. And of course, understandably so, Palestinian resistance groups have been warning of this very same danger, the danger that people will fall into a state of complacency in the West. Here's an example of such a statement from one resistance group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, issued in the last couple of days. And I'm quoting here: "The Popular Front issues an urgent appeal to the world's free people, solidarity networks, human rights organizations, and student, youth, women's, and trade union movements to restore the momentum of popular mobilization and mass movements globally in solidarity with Palestine and Gaza. The front stresses that restoring this momentum is an urgent necessity to press for an end to the aggression and violations, for the occupation to fully implement the agreement, for opening crossings without conditions, and for ensuring the flow of humanitarian aid into the Strip amidst the escalating catastrophe." Now, on the very day where we were in court in Ottawa, arguing that Canada has violated its duty to prevent genocide under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention of 1948, Israelis murdered in cold blood 2 young Palestinian men in the occupied West Bank. And this particular act of savagery was captured on video. And this is what happened. So there you hear a gunshot after they went back underneath this separation, and apparently they were told to sit down, and there are more gunshots. And you can see there that their bodies are now motionless, and it's pretty clear that they've been killed, and it's crystal clear that they were unarmed. Now, the victims of this barbarism, according to the Palestinian Civil Affairs Authority, were Al-Munistir Bila Mahmoud Qasim Abdullah, 26 years old, and Youssef Ali Youssef Asa, 37 years old, from Jenin, and may their memories be eternal. After the Israeli terrorists murdered these two young men, the terrorists gleefully absconded with their bodies, which is a sick, sadistic practice that the Israeli military has been engaging in for many years. I'm quite confident that this latest crime makes Ahik Aharony even prouder to have served in Israel's genocidal military. I know you're watching this, Ahik. You seem to be watching everything that I publish. So tell us all, do you praise these terrorists for killing unarmed Palestinians in cold blood? Is this your definition of honor, of valor? Now, of course, the response from Western regimes to this barbarism has been deafening silence. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand has not uttered a peep about this crime. On the contrary, hours after the video of the atrocity went viral on social media, Anand went before a parliamentary committee in Ottawa. So this would have been the day when we were in court arguing that Canada, under Anand and Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, are violating the Genocide Convention. She went before a parliamentary committee to spew hot air about Canada's so-called values being at the heart of her government's foreign policy. And here is what she had to say.
Priorities are clear. Protecting Canada's sovereignty, ensuring our long-term prosperity, and our economic robustness. And our values remain integral to the pursuit of these goals, and they remain integral to who we are as Canadians. Canada continues to stand for democracy, the rules-based international order, human rights, gender equality, environmental protection, and reconciliation. They are a source of strength. There will be detractors, internally and externally, in terms of the pursuit of these values. But we will never retreat from the values that make Canadians Canadian.
Now, you'll notice there that Anita Anand made reference to internal detractors. I can't say for certain that she was including me in that category, but I suspect she is because we know each other personally. Anita Anand was a law professor at my alma mater, the University of Toronto Law School, and we encountered each other in the context of my securities class actions work years ago, when she was a law professor and had not yet entered politics. And since she became the foreign minister, I have frankly been vociferously critical of her on social media and here on Reason to Resist, and have made a point of trying to make her aware of my criticisms at every opportunity. But I'm sure she wasn't referring only to me. Basically, what Anita Anand was doing in that clip was lying through her teeth. As we documented in preparing this lawsuit against the Canadian government, as many others have documented, the Maple in particular, an independent media outlet, has done absolutely stellar reporting on this. Canada has continued under Anita Anand's watch to send lethal military equipment to Israel as it carries out a genocide before the eyes of the world. Canada accords charitable status under Anand's watch to Canadian organizations that funnel money to organizations in Israel that are affiliated with its sick and depraved military. Canada has refused to impose sanctions on the Israeli Prime Minister or the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, even though they have been indicted by the ICC. It has not sanctioned any military leader of Israel. Canada continues to spew Israel's genocidal rhetoric and to try to manipulate public opinion so that it can continue to support Israel. Canada allows all of this on Anand's watch, Canadian citizens to serve in Israel's genocidal military, and even allows organizations to come onto Canadian soil in violation of Canadian law and recruit Canadian citizens to serve in Israel's military during a time of genocide. So that tells you all you need to know about Anita Anand's values. And I can assure you, Ms. Anand, that I will continue to be, as you put it, an internal detractor. Now, in other news about Israel's genocide, the UN Committee on Torture issued a report yesterday, November 28th, in which it concluded that Israel has, quote, a de facto state policy of organized and widespread torture. And here you can see an article from The Guardian published today about this report. The report raised concerns about the impunity of Israeli security forces for war crimes and expressed, quote, deep concern over allegations of repeated severe beatings, dog attacks, electrocution, waterboarding, use of prolonged stress positions, and sexual violence, close quote. The report said Palestinian detainees were humiliated by, quote, being made to act like animals or being urinated on, and that they were systematically denied medical care and subject to excessive use of restraints, in some cases resulting in amputation. The new report, covering a 2-year period since the beginning of the Gaza war, as The Guardian calls it, on October 7th, 2023, draws attention to the, quote, high proportion of children who are currently detained without charge or on remand, close quote, noting the age of criminal responsibility imposed by Israel is 12, and that children younger than 12 have also been detained. Children categorized as security prisoners, the report says, quote, have severe restrictions on family contact, may be held in solitary confinement, and do not have access to education in violation of international standards, close quote. You know, as a general matter, even for adults, solitary confinement is a form of torture, as psychiatric experts have opined numerous times. Subjecting children as young as 12 years old or perhaps even younger to solitary confinement, that's a level of barbarism that simply boggles the mind. The report notes that, quote, to date, no state officials, I repeat, no state officials have been held responsible or accountable in Israel for the deaths of detained and tortured Palestinians. Given Israel's use of torture, it's no surprise that Israel just voted against a UN resolution condemning torture. And here you can see the results of a vote held on November 20th of this year on resolution C3/80/L49. This is a draft resolution on torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. There were only 3 states in the entire world that voted against this resolution, and they were the United States, Israel, and Argentina. Why Argentina? Well, that might have something to do with the fact that, first of all, Javier Milei, its president, is a fanatical Zionist psychopath. And secondly, Donald Trump just bailed out his regime with something in the range of $20 billion while purporting to put the interests of America first. $20 billion will buy you a lot of votes at the UN General Assembly, it appears, but only 3 states voted against a resolution condemning torture. Wow. I have no doubt, by the way, that these revolutions will make Ahik Aharony even prouder to have served in Israel's military and to have been in the service of the Israeli state and to call himself an Israeli and a Zionist. You must be proud indeed. A historian who spent more than a month in Gaza at the turn of the year says he saw utterly convincing evidence, those were the words he used, that Israel supported looters who attacked aid convoys during Israel's genocidal rampage in Gaza. The historian in question is Jean-Pierre Filieux, a professor of Middle East Studies at France's prestigious Sciences Po University, who entered Gaza in December of last year, where he was hosted by an international humanitarian organization in the southern coastal zone of Al-Mawasi in the Gaza Strip. His eyewitness account, a historian in Gaza, was published in French in May and in English this month. And in his book, Filieu describes Israeli military attacks on security personnel protecting aid convoys. And these attacks, he says, he witnessed this with his own eyes, permitted looters to seize huge quantities of food and other supplies destined for desperately needy Palestinians. That was the summary of what he wrote in his book. Famine threatened parts of Gaza at the time, according to international humanitarian agencies. And so here again, we see one of the many ways in which Israel has been perpetrating a genocide, while all the while trying to shift the blame for its savagery onto Palestinians who are simply trying to defend themselves. Finally, I want to conclude with some important news about Syria. Overnight on Thursday, Israel's genocide forces attempted an incursion into the Beit Jan area of Damascus, the capital of Syria, but this time they were met with stiff resistance. And you can see here a report in the Israeli media saying that 6 soldiers were hurt in a gun battle as the Israeli military attempted to detain what it called, quote unquote, terror suspects in the south of the country. Its forces are there, of course, illegally. Their very presence on the soil of Syria is a violation of international law and the sovereignty of the Syrian state. They have no right whatsoever to detain anybody. If there's any act of criminality happening on Syrian soil, as long as those persons haven't actually attacked Israel. And I don't even know of an Israeli report, let alone a credible report, that Israel has been attacked in the past several months by anybody from the territory of Syria. So not only is the presence of their forces on Syrian soil illegal and a violation of the UN Charter, but they have no plausible claim that they have come under attack from people who are stationed on Syrian soil. So in any case, when these terrorists attempted to infiltrate Beit Jan, they were met with, as I mentioned, considerable resistance, and 6 of their terrorists, their uniformed terrorists, were wounded, 3 of them, according to the Israeli military, seriously. Now, the genocidal entity reacted with this entirely lawful and moral act of resistance with typical barbarism, and it began to shell the community of Beit Jan. And as a result of that, at least 13 Syrians were killed in the community. And here you can see members or residents of Beit Jan mourning the deaths of these persons. Several of the bodies of the victims are lying on the ground before them. And the victims reportedly included a family of 5, including a woman and 3 children. Syria's foreign ministry, led by the Western-backed head chopper al-Julani, surprisingly, I suppose, condemned the Israeli incursion and called it a war crime, not because that's untrue. It is absolutely true. In fact, every single day, Israel is committing multiple war crimes on Syrian soil. But what is surprising, what is surprising about it is that it came from al-Julani, or a regime headed by him, because he clearly is, at this stage, nothing but an abject vassal of Washington. But the rhetoric was not backed up, of course, by any meaningful act of self-defense by the military forces of the al-Julani regime. Resistance forces praised the courage and determination shown by the Syrians who took up arms against the Israeli aggressor. And here you can see a number of resistance groups, their statements being quoted on the Resistance News Network channel. The Syrian Social Nationalist Party saluted the heroic operation in Quneitra countryside, viewing the rejection of the occupation's presence as an act of restoring national dignity. The Islamic Jihad movement, the Palestinian Mujahideen movement, Hamas, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So these are groups with very different political orientation. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is a secular, left-leaning group, obviously very different from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And there's unanimity, I think it can fairly be said, amongst the Palestinians for support for the Syrian resistance and all resistance groups throughout West Asia. There's been actually an extraordinary degree of solidarity amongst various resistance groups across the region during this period, something which over time I think is bound to be or impose very, very serious costs on the US occupier and his proxies in the region. A historian who spent more than a month in Gaza at the turn of the year says he saw utterly convincing evidence, those were the words he used, that Israel supported looters who attacked aid convoys during Israel's genocidal rampage in Gaza. The historian in question is Jean-Pierre Filieux, a professor of Middle East Studies at France's prestigious Sciences Po University, who entered Gaza in December of last year, where he was hosted by an international humanitarian organization in the southern coastal zone of Al-Mawasi in the Gaza Strip. His eyewitness account, A Historian in Gaza, was published in French in May and in English this month. And in his book, Filieux describes Israeli military attacks on security personnel protecting aid convoys. And these attacks, he says, he witnessed this with his own eyes, permitted looters to seize huge quantities of food and other supplies destined for desperately needy Palestinians. That was the summary of what he wrote in his book. Famine threatened parts of Gaza at the time, according to international humanitarian agencies. And so here again, we see one of the many ways in which Israel has been perpetrating a genocide, while all the while trying to shift the blame for its savagery onto Palestinians who are simply trying to defend themselves. Finally, I want to conclude with some important news about Syria. Overnight on Thursday, Israel's genocide forces attempted an incursion into the Beit Jan area of Damascus, the capital of Syria, but this time they were met with stiff resistance. And you can see here a report in the Israeli media saying that 6 soldiers were hurt in a gun battle as the Israeli military attempted to detain what it called, quote unquote, terror suspects in the south of the country. Its forces are there, of course, illegally. Their very presence on the soil of Syria is a violation of international law and the sovereignty of the Syrian state. They have no right whatsoever to detain anybody. If there's any act of criminality happening on Syrian soil, as long as those persons haven't actually attacked Israel. And I don't even know of an Israeli report, let alone a credible report, that Israel has been attacked in the past several months by anybody from the territory of Syria. So not only is the presence of their forces on Syrian soil illegal and a violation of the UN Charter, but they have no plausible claim that they have come under attack from people who are stationed on Syrian soil. So in any case, when these terrorists attempted to infiltrate Beit Jan, they were met with, as I mentioned, considerable resistance, and 6 of their terrorists, their uniformed terrorists, were wounded, 3 of them, according to the Israeli military, seriously. Now, the genocidal entity reacted with this entirely lawful and moral act of resistance with typical barbarism, and it began to shell the community of Beit Jan. And as a result of that, at least 13 Syrians were killed in the community. And here you can see members or residents of Beit Jan mourning the deaths of these persons. Several of the bodies of the victims are lying on the ground before them. And the victims reportedly included a family of 5, including a woman and 3 children. Syria's foreign ministry, led by the Western-backed head chopper al-Julani, surprisingly, I suppose, condemned the Israeli incursion and called it a war crime, not because that's untrue. It is absolutely true. In fact, every single day, Israel is committing multiple war crimes on Syrian soil. But what is surprising, what is surprising about it is that it came from al-Julani, or a regime headed by him, because he clearly is, at this stage, nothing but an abject vassal of Washington. But the rhetoric was not backed up, of course, by any meaningful act of self-defense by the military forces of the al-Julani regime. Resistance forces praised the courage and determination shown by the Syrians who took up arms against the Israeli aggressor. And here you can see a number of resistance groups, their statements being quoted on the Resistance News Network channel. The Syrian Social Nationalist Party saluted the heroic operation in Quneitra countryside, viewing the rejection of the occupation's presence as an act of restoring national dignity. The Islamic Jihad movement, the Palestinian Mujahideen movement, Hamas, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So these are groups with very different political orientation. You know, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is a secular, left-leaning group, obviously very different from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. There's unanimity, I think it can fairly be said, amongst the Palestinians for support for the Syrian resistance and all resistance groups throughout West Asia. There's been actually an extraordinary degree of solidarity amongst various resistance groups across the region during this period, something which over time I think is bound to be or impose very, very serious costs on the US occupier and his proxies in the region. And finally, these revelations about acts of resistance in Beit Jan are accompanied by reports that there have been significant protests against Israel's ongoing aggressions against Syria within Syria itself. And you can imagine that's quite a dangerous thing to do in the current political environment there, with the government run by this bloodthirsty Western-backed war criminal al-Julani. You know, going out in public and protesting is undoubtedly a dangerous undertaking. But that hasn't stopped a lot of people from going out in the streets. There's rage in the streets of Syria. It is becoming increasingly difficult, I think, for the al-Julani regime to manage. And as I've said from the very beginning of his tenure, after he was installed in power by Israel, Turkey, and the United States, not by the people of Syria, to be sure, his regime is likely to be short-lived, and his days as the leader of the Syrian nation are likely to be numbered. That's my report for today. Tomorrow we'll be holding a live stream at around 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Reason to Resist correspondent Rami Yahya. Nowadays, Rami has been spending a lot of time in Paris, France, and he recently attended a convention or an exposition for companies in the military technology sector, and he managed to obtain some very interesting information about how Israeli military technologies and surveillance technologies are being deployed in Western countries, both by government actors and by privately owned entities. So please join us tomorrow so you can hear these revelations. Rami is not only going to tell you about them, he's going to show you evidence to back up what he learned. So in the interim, we wish you well. And again, please take an opportunity or the moment today to show solidarity with the Palestinian people on this International Day of Solidarity for Palestinians. This is Dimitri Lascaris signing off from Toronto, Canada on November 29th, 2025.